it's Kelly and Ryan from AMS. We just sat down with Kevin Antreassian. We talked about Backroom Studios, his recording philosophy, and his career as a teacher. Hope you enjoy. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being here with us, Kevin. It is a pleasure.
Thanks for inviting me.
Now, Kevin owns a studio called Backroom Studios. When you first started Backroom, I've heard you didn't have quite the plethora of knowledge that you have today. How did you make that first step towards making that initial investment without all the knowledge to back it up?
Yes. Risk.
Oh.
Well, I mean, it's kind of, for me, it was one of those things that you kind of learn as you go.
Sure.
And it was 2007-ish, so the internet isn't what it is now. So, like, I didn't even know what compression was. I didn't know any of that stuff. So when I was tracking bands, like, on the low budget side of things, like, I didn't have, like, a computer to use or anything. I just borrowed a bunch of gear from friends. Like, I didn't even have a desk to put stuff on. So, like, I feel like I've said this a bunch of times already, but I used some stools that I found in the studio, and then I put a piece of plywood on it, and then I brought home my gaming computer to the studio, and we all rocked headphones. So it was pretty bad, but you just get good using what you have, and it doesn't really matter. Like, it matters to a degree, but like, as long as you can cut your teeth on something and then you get the experience, then you can also see if it's for you or not. Because a lot of people just want to like jump right in and be like, this is my job. And it's like, it's not for everyone. Like, it's different when you're working on your own music and people initially want to do that. But then it's like, wait, I have to work on this person's music? I don't really like their music. It's like, well, that's a lot of the job is trying to like adjust to that.
Would you say that's the case more often than not, that you're presented with music that you have to work on that you feel like you don't actually like?
At this point in the career, 20 plus years deep or whatever, not really. It's all, at this point, everything's great because it's all just like repeat customers, people I've grown up with, stuff like that. So like, I have the luxury at this point of turning down gigs that I don't have super interested, or passing them on to like one of my other assistants. But in the beginning, like, literally, drunk people would walk downstairs. Like, they would find the place and they would be like, I just want to record a song right now. I f***ed up with my girlfriend and I want to make it right. And I'd be like, cool, you got money? Hop on in. Like, let's do this. So literally anything I would record back then. And just to get experience, like, I didn't want to ever say no to a job like back then. And so.
Did you ever have any recordings where someone drunk came in, like a face tattoo, where you're like, look, I can't do this in good conscience. I can't release this?
The only time I've ever, like, at that point, like, turned down things is if I've heard, like, stay away from that person. Like, you don't want to be in that network. So that's the only time. I won't get into details, but that's really it.
We'll talk about it off camera.
Yeah, exactly.
For some of those rougher recordings, were you doing more, like, on the back end to try to make them sound like, to make up for the lack of gear?
Always, yes. I could probably make almost anyone sound amazing at this point, which is part of the job. There's also like a moral code there too of like, do you try to like, I don't know, do you just like hold back on that and then just let artists be artists, or do you really step in and make them sound better than they actually are?
Right.
Because you're never gonna help them achieve maybe learning about their own, imperfections and weak spots if you just continue to just be like, all right, that was good enough. Like back in the day when we were tracking to tape, that was not a luxury we had. Like, you came in, you were prepared, you ripped it, you were super awesome, or you were in a band. You couldn't afford to be in a band. Studio time was not like it is now, So you could say that we're doing them a huge service by like making them sound amazing, but also it's kind of a disservice because we're completely lying to them
right
a lot of the time,
Have you ever like followed a band that you knew were like a great live entity, and then you were tasked with the idea of recording them and realizing they were completely different in the studio, where it was like that just didn't translate?
Yeah, that definitely happens. That definitely happens.
Do you just slide the check back to them? Thanks for coming.
No, I mean, like, there's definitely like a middle ground of like, like, let me help them sound better, and then also like, in the nicest way possible, constructive way possible, help them to learn where their weaknesses are. So that way,
I'd love to hear some of that.
Yeah, I know engineers that like beat it into them, and it's not. I don't think it's super fruitful to like crush egos in the studio,
right?
Because that's just not going to help you. Also, in a business sense, like the best form of advertising is just making sure that everyone's happy when they leave. Like regardless if the record sounds super sick, like the sickest record of all time, or if it sounds pretty mediocre, but they're stoked, that's more important to me. Like if they're stoked on the product they had a great experience, everyone was laughing, it was like not super stressed out the whole time. It's way better than having a great band be super upset with the record of how the process went, and then it comes out great, but like them just not being happy, they won't come back and they won't talk good about you. I know this from other people's experience.
So have you ever had an experience where you felt like you had to do something that was against your better judgment so that an artist left happy?
I've had one comes to mind, the opposite, where they wanted something specific, like really aggressive, like auto-tune, and they were a great singer, or they were a really good singer, and I was like, I don't think we need this. This is very of the era right now. I feel like if you do this, you're going to put a hard like timestamp on this, and you're going to like 5 years from now, you're going to like, why did I do that? Which I still agree with. And then they were super bummed out because I kind of put my foot down on that, and we didn't go that route. And I think I probably, like, we're still friends, but like I think I lost that client at that point. So
that's funny too. Obviously, you're a musician on top of being a producer, and so you know what it's like to come into and think to myself, is this going to be as timeless as I want it to be, or is it going to be a product of that era? And especially in heavy music, in extreme stuff and metal stuff, you'll hear something that at the time is so fresh and exciting, and then 5-10 years down the line, you're like, oh my God, that sounds like 2005.
Right. And I guess that could be good or bad, but
sure,
like
it's emblematic of that time.
Yeah. So there's definitely stuff that I've done personally or like worked on as a producer engineer that were like, at the time you're like, I'm doing this because they're asking for it, but I know this is not going to age well.
Right. I feel like when I write lyrics, I'll try to avoid mentioning like my iPhone, like specific, like specific technology things that like cement you like in the 2010s or
Your
whatever.
iPod.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it can like rip you out of an artistic moment a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely.
But I think there's also nothing wrong with having elements of a genre that are like characteristic of a time period, of course.
Totally. I mean, it could be nostalgic in some regard, but then you're always going to put the listener in that time period when they hear that. So just keep that in mind.
Definitely. And speaking of time periods, I feel like in older recordings, there's more of a chance that you're listening to something that's less edited than nowadays.
Oh yes.
Yeah, right. How does that affect the listening experience for you?
So like, I don't listen to a lot of contemporary, like modern stuff, because part of it sucks because like when you work on music for like 8 hours plus a day, the unfortunate side effect of that is that you don't, like when you're younger, you don't like seek out stuff to listen to fill that, because I don't have that void that need is met by listening and working with people every day on stuff that I don't know. Like I don't go in the car immediately like, let's listen to some new music. Like I'm fried at that point. So it's unfortunate, but it is the gig for me. Just like, a mechanic, if they're working on cars and wrenching for 8 hours, they're not going to go home and be like, oh, I'm going to work on my project car. I can't imagine that's a thing. They might, maybe. Psychopath. But
no, you hear stories of like high-end chefs where they'll be around that all day, and like when they're out, all they want is like a bowl of Cheerios or something. Just like, I need to completely get out of that headspace.
Absolutely.
What would you do to wash your mouth out of that? Like when you're coming out of the studio, you're like, I can't listen to nothing.
Podcast.
Really?
Yeah, just a podcast.
Be sure to like and subscribe.
Yes, I love that. But yes, that's usually what I'm listening to, for better or worse. And if I do choose to listen to like something, it's definitely something pre-edited era. Like I do enjoy everything from, a lot of the pre-2000s kind of stuff before my too close to it brain knows like what's potentially already like really going on. Like when for sure that no shenanigans were happening, and they came in and they practiced their ass off and they were super prepared and they did it in maybe 2 takes or something like that, or a 1 take with a punch in, I just immediately feel better about that as a listener. And I wish I didn't know that,
Right.
There's definitely like some weird side effects of doing this and the kind of music I work on a lot, that like I'm super hyper aware of timing now. Whereas when I was younger, I wasn't. I was more ignorant to that. And now like anything that's like slightly flamming or like even like milliseconds, it drives me nuts. And I really wish I could turn that off, but unfortunately it's just when you stare at that screen all day and you hear it for so long, it's just like it gets embedded in you.
You could actually see it quantized. And it's like, oh man, it's like playing Tetris almost. Yeah.
I feel like dissecting it too much like takes away a lot of the joy.
Absolutely.
What is something
Living
that
proof.
like gets you back into that joy when you're missing it?
I like playing with musicians live because that stuff is not there. Obviously, you know, like you I think your brain forces it to let go, and you kind of just or more in the moment. Whereas studio work is more like this can be like replayed a million times or whatever, and so like everything, you know, has to be edited or at least looked at under the magnifying glass. But live stuff, like jamming with my groups and stuff, it's just like, that happened. That was a moment. That was cool. You know?
And it's fun to look back on it, because sometimes when you play live, you'll think this is the greatest thing ever, and you hear back, you're like, oh my God. Like, or vice versa. You may have just thrown yourself into it and thought nothing of it, and then like a month or two down the line, you hear it and you're like, this was really great. I didn't think of anything at the time. Yet when you're in the studio, you were looking at everything under a microscope, and it can kind of overcook it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually great to, if you want to try this, do a jam session or whatever, a rehearsal, record it, and then literally never listen to it.
Wow. I love that. I don't know if I can do that.
Oh, that was great. Cool. All right. And then just delete it. So that way you don't have to like actually go.
You're very secure with yourself, aren't you? That would bother me.
For me, that comes from insecurity. I just don't want to look at my mistakes.
Right, because you have this momentary like satisfaction of like, that felt really good. And you look around at everyone's like, yeah, that was awesome. And then if you go back and listen, you're going to hear all this stuff.
Delete.
Yeah, just delete it. And then at least once in a while, it's like a nice ego boost. It just feels good.
All right, I'll give that a try.
Yeah.
Do you think the pressure to be perfect or to sound perfect kind of kills a little bit for you?
I mean, definitely at a time in my life, I was striving for that. It's not really achievable. And I remember the bass player when I was playing Dillinger, Liam told me, I was like really adamant on like nailing everything like perfectly. And he's like, all right, well, that's great, because you need to leave an extra 20% for all the mistakes that are going to happen anyway. Because live shows like that, like, so much unknown stuff happens.
I mean, that's like trying to execute chaos.
Yeah.
I mean, when I listen to a band like that, it's almost like I don't know what's going on half the time, but it's like I'm afraid and I like it. You know?
And that's definitely part of the appeal.
Yeah, it's not like you would ever hear two Dillinger shows and go, oh yeah, that's the same band. I mean, you never know.
Yeah.
Which must have been thrilling.
Yeah, and terrifying.
Yeah,
Being on the stage, you're a little more safe most of the time.
It's an interesting mix of like very methodical and technical, and also like the antithesis of that at the same time, because of like the entire spirit of it, you know, like it's like chaos and it's like it's a lot to handle, but also so specific and, you know, well intentioned. That's a really interesting line to ride to me. How do you balance the like controlled chaos of it?
I mean, you know, it's definitely interesting because like some of the guys in the group, they all have, you know, different backgrounds. Some err on the more side of like punk and like not being so rigid. Like I went to music school, so like that was kind of baked into me at that point in my life. And funny enough, I teach there now, so like it's so weird to be on the other side of that desk now in the same rooms with these students. Like some of the guys, I would be like, hey, I'm not getting this part. Like, I don't know what's happening. Am I supposed to come on the end of this phrase? Or like, is it in 14? Or what are we doing right here? Or is it in 15? And then some of the guys can tell me. And then some of the guys are just like, you just got to feel it. And I'm just like, I need the number. I need to just like plan ahead. That's how my brain is working on this. That's how like my regiment was with all my bands, is like, I was not a very good guitar player for a very long time until I played with a drummer who was like insane. And he like taught me how to like we would write parts and they would be written out on like the whiteboard, you know, notation wise. We'd follow along for like hours and try to like an 8-hour rehearsal. So that's like how I grew up, and then when someone's like, you just got to feel it, it's like, that's tough.
Yeah.
It is tough, but if you're good at counting, it could also throw you off. I mean, I'm not a very good guitar player, and I'm not saying that to Fisher. I'm just not. I enjoy it, so I don't care about it. But if you sat and listened to me play by myself, it'd be like, this is kind of boring. But if you have a good drummer and a good bass player, I can make you think I'm a good guitar player because I'm playing along.
I'm the same way.
Right.
Like, I feel like I'm not like if you just heard me like practicing, like kind of like you're saying, I would be like I would rather not do that in front of someone. But like if you put me in the right element, it works. You know, it's like a good tool for a certain job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard your search for gear has slowed recently. Why is that?
That's a lie.
Well, like I'm happy with what I have. Which
That's come on.
When you work
man.
here, I mean, it's obviously just like walking down the aisle there and seeing all the stuff. Like, there's always something to catch your eye.
We're gonna pat you down on the way out.
So there's you probably have something always presented in front of you of like, this is the new thing. Like the last thing I saw like that even like wanted to potentially even play on was I think that new Bogner Uberschall that just came out recently within the last year. I was like, that might be something to play on. But I think I get exhausted. And from a business sense, getting enough stuff to get like a product to people that is consistent and good and I'm happy with, I've gotten that. So like getting more compressors or more EQs doesn't really net me a whole lot. It just kind of makes me as a engineer go like, I have some more options now. Like it doesn't make sense fiscally to like do that.
But there's an art to that. I mean, we've talked about it in a number of interviews. I think we all talk about gain and amps and vocals. She can sing great, but like poor equipment will take that away from you. And when to add EQ and compression and to do it tastefully in a way that you go, I could never listen to it any other way. Like you just nailed it.
Yeah.
But there's an art to that. And I mean, that's what keeps the lights on for you. When someone says, here's the raw track, and you EQ it and compress it in the right way, it's a totally different animal.
Absolutely, and I definitely strive for applying those processes to things. But like, once you have like 10 of something, it's just like, which one do I use for that? And if you have 10 to choose from or 100, it's like, what's the real? For me personally, like
no, you're right. It's your answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get some option paralysis there eventually.
Yes, and that is a
good
Dillinger album.
Term. You're right.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
So yeah, no, like I do love stuff and new gear and like finding out how all that stuff works. But like at a certain point, it's for me more important to just focus on what's in front of me and how to make it work than like how to make a piece of gear that I've never tried work and incorporate that in. For now, maybe that'll change. Maybe in like 5 years, I'll like, want to buy a whole bunch of new stuff or something.
Well, and that begs the question, because I think we're all of the mind that, we have certain pieces of gear that maybe we've had for a long time, and you didn't think much of it at the time, but then you realize how often you've used it for a lot. Are there certain benchmark pieces of gear, whether it's a guitar, amp, whatever? I know you're a Friedman guy. You like their amps. Is there anything where you're like, this is my whoopee, I need this for this?
Well, I just took out my API 2500 bus compressor, which lives on my drum bus and has for the last, 10 plus years. And before I owned the actual unit, it was the plug-in. So I took that out because it's getting serviced, and I'm just like, I feel really weird about not having that in my possession because I have mixes coming in. I'm like, I can't start without this. Like I can start without, I could use something else, but like honestly, that has such an integral part to like how I get drums to sound that like I feel weird about just like trying something else right now. Like so that's definitely something that's kind of,
it'll be okay.
I hope so. I haven't heard back from them.
maybe it's smashed to pieces. You never know. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes being forced to try something new forces you to kind of go in a direction that you wouldn't
This
have.
is true.
And then forces you to make something that you wouldn't have made, which is not always a bad thing.
This is true.
Glass half
So
full.
let's hope that it's completely
Yeah.
smashed or stolen.
What if we strip it? Let's say, what if we strip it down though? Like obviously you built this place to be how you wanted it to be. Even before you press a button on anything, you listen to the room. What are you looking for in a room?
Well, honestly, in my live room, it's 20 by 30-ish, but it doesn't have like high ceilings. Like the ceilings in here are much higher by a few feet at least. So it has an interesting sound. On paper, it's not like a great sound. so that you got to do a lot of treatment to kind of get what you need out of it. So like for my rooms, instead of having maybe having something really high up, I have something really far out to kind of get that the reverb length I'm looking for in some of that stuff. So like I wouldn't say my room is a particularly good sounding room. I just kind of understand after all this time how to work it to get to where I want it to be. Oh, why are these not working? Let's give them some juice. Probably want those to work. Absolutely. Okay, that gives me some room. I can put I want to make these toms sound good, you know?
I mean, there's kind of two schools of thought to that, because sometimes you can come into a room and the room is it's got such a vibe to it.
Yes.
You're like, boy, I just want to translate that to what goes in here.
Yeah.
And then other rooms are relatively flat and neutral, and you go, well, we'll fix it with all the extra sauce.
Right.
And it's knowing when to do that and when not to, I guess, is part of what makes you good at what you do.
Yeah, and it's strangely enough to do that room, like there's certain deficiencies for sure in the room, especially when dealing with like overheads and stuff, and where things are bouncing up and down. But it seems to work really good for live shows. Like a lot of the shows we have there, like the smaller showcase things we do every few months, like people really like the way it sounds in there. That's what they tell me. So it seems to work.
Would you say capturing the energy of a live performance is more so what you're interested in lately?
I mean, if I'm doing a band, like recording a band live, I always like. One of my engineers, Scott, who's been with us for a long time now, like over 10 years, he does more of the live recording stuff, and like I kind of envy that, because it's there's more that can go wrong. There's so much more that can happen there, and when I do that with certain bands, it is fun. Like so yeah, trying to like push a guitar player or a bass player to play with the drummer when they're just like, I just want to play to a click. I'm like, well, do you think it'll be maybe more cool if we play with together like you're used to, like rehearsal, and then just a lot of times they're hesitant and they're just like, no, I just want to play with just the click and the scratch tracks. And I'm like, all right, if that's what's going to be most comfortable for you to get what you need done, that's fine. But like I try to at least nudge to kind of like put more live factors in there, you know, even like cueing off people, even if it's making you push the beat like ahead of the beat or whatever, like that could be cool if everyone's working together, I think.
And is that to get rid of some of the like mechanical thing that can sort of happen when musicians play too much, like tight, isolated in the click?
I mean, it really depends on the genre. So you have to obviously have an understanding of the genre you're working on. If it's like super mechanical, like tech death metal or something like that, and it's supposed to kind of, or it does usually sound like that, like, and that's what the artist wants, then just do that. But if it's more loose, maybe more like punk rock or something like that, something like a grind band, then you don't want it to sound too mechanical, because that's not doing the the genre service. So yeah, doing more things that can add some little bit of looseness is good.
Well, we kind of fall victim to all those terms too. You could hear something and say, "Oh, that sounds warm," and you might go, "No, it sounds muddy." So someone might go, "That's tight," and they go, "No, it's stiff." I mean, eventually you fall prey to those things. So I don't know if a band ever came to you and said, even before we start recording, "This is the vibe we're looking for."
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'll usually ask that too, because I want to know. I want to see if I could hit with their pitching.
Right, because groove can sometimes be sloppy.
Yeah.
But that's also the charm.
Right.
And some bands are like that. We don't want that at all.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, you're losing part of the magic.
Usually I would think that like when an artist is throwing those kind of terms at me, I'm going to trust that they're good enough that they know.
To execute.
Yeah, to execute it. Like if they're saying for this section, I know it's, like I'm playing with the click, but I want to play behind. So like leave it like that. Like I've had like even my own drummer from Sawtooth say that to me. So I know he's really good. So I'm not going to be like, no, don't play like that. Like if the intent is to pull back on the beat, like that's awesome. Like let's try to make that happen.
That's a good point. I mean, having that drummer where they're just behind a little bit. And if they weren't, sorry to interrupt, it would have been not the same. Yeah.
I mean, it evokes a feeling, like when you're on top of the beat or ahead of the beat a little bit, you have like, you get anxious, like there's a little bit of anxiety, and that can be great for certain things. And when you pull back, it just feels like it's just like, I don't know, like crawling a little bit, just feels like undulating in like some weird ways. Like that can be great too, if that's what you want for that part.
So using music to create that kind of atmosphere, would you say that playing live yourself gives you some of that as well? Like allows you, that's like an outlet for you to get some of that, emotional atmosphere that music creates? Yeah,
I mean, I love playing live. I've always, even before like studio stuff, was like a performer kind of, that's what I love to do. And I there was a point in my life where like the studio kind of took the forefront, and I was like focused on that, building the business, when I was younger. And then I wasn't playing as much live. And like, I'm a super like lighthearted, like high energy, like silly person, and I don't get like depressed. I just don't. So I noticed I was getting a little depressed, but I couldn't like put my finger on it. I was like, what is that? Like, why do I feel this weird feeling? And I think it was because I wasn't performing live. I wasn't getting that outlet. And then I joined a group or two, and then I started playing, and it quickly subsided. So like, definitely need that outlet in my life. And it's important to me that like, even if I'm busy at the studio, like doing stuff, that like I find some project, no matter how like busy it is, like it's touring, whatever, or if it's just like kind of like Sawtooth, my current project is like pretty part-timey. But I need it. I need that in my life for sure.
Of course, yeah. I'm sure teaching also gives you an outlet as well. What do you teach? Tell me about your class.
Yes. So I teach at William Paterson, which is, like I said before, where I went through that program. And strangely enough, like I said, it's weird to be there and teach there, but it is interesting. It's that perspective it's very unique. Like, I don't know that many people that can say that. Like falling asleep as a student on the other side, and then now being like, "Hey, wake up!" You know. So, but no, I teach like the intro level class in one semester, and then the other semester I teach all the advanced stuff. And those two classes the next semester I teach are two classes that I created from the ground up. So it's advanced mixing, and then guitar tech, which is a newer class that I'm working on. All these classes, like when you create a curriculum, it's like it takes me like 3 semesters to really hone and get it right, because it's, I don't know, I kind of just wing it.
Well, it's almost like playing live, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You got and you revise it, and you go like, okay, this hit well with the kids. Like, this wasn't as good. I could tell I'm losing them at this point. It's like working on an act. Like, it's just like, all right, next semester I know I need to fix this and adjust this. And by the third semester, it's pretty refined, I think. So yeah, I'm excited to do that, and it's great. Like, I do think I can give back to them, because I do have a decent amount of like experience, like weird experience, like studio experience, like live touring experience, playing stuff. So like I always ask them, like, ask me anything. Like, it doesn't have to just pertain to the subject matter. If you're like, how is a live show like? Like, ask me weird stuff. Like, I've been around a little bit.
How different is the type of music that the students are making at William Paterson than when you went there?
Wow, that's interesting. Well, there's still like William Paterson has a big jazz department and classical department, so there's still a lot of that there. When I was there, I remember they had like middays where they would just be like, the student's performance this week, and they put you in a midday, and it's required by the students to watch this every like Tuesday or Thursday or something, and it was some of them were pretty rough. Like, there was like interpretive dance today. It's like, oh, okay. Or just like a solo violinist, and it's like, ooh, intonation's a little rough. So they, that's what I remember a lot of. And obviously the jazz students were like always, I felt like not like I wasn't even in the same school. Like, we'd share classes, and like I have a decent ear, but at the time they would teach both the classical track and the jazz track, and then the jazz students were way more advanced, I felt anyway. And the teacher would go behind, the upright piano and just like hit a diminished chord, or like something really distant, really stacked chord, and he'd be like, the root is this. Write out the rest of the notes. And I would be, and they would go right to work, and I'd be like,
I'll see.
But no, I had to like put in the work. I had to like see that teacher after hours and like work on that stuff. And now I'm like pretty decent at that kind of thing, but it takes work. I think it's just, you gotta want to get the ear for that.
And that's a good point. I mean, you could teach all sorts of things, but you can't teach someone to want it.
Yeah.
And so whether it's public speaking or singing or playing live, some of the most shy people in the world you could meet are musicians. And then you see them on stage and you think, they're losing their mind. It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And then you see them and you talk to them after, and they're like, they want to dig a hole and jump in. But I think when you know it and you're passionate about it, you're not nervous about it. It doesn't feel like you're shy because you care.
Yeah.
Maybe when you're talking to someone one-on-one, it might come across that you're shy, but when you're up there, you're a total extrovert.
Right.
And so that's part of the fun of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can kind of like on stage be a character if you want to. Like, you don't necessarily have to be exactly yourself. So that can be fun too, to kind of like put that on if you want to.
Sometimes I find it easier to be on stage than like talking to a person because like I don't know what to say to you, but like I know what I want to sound like.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely. I mean, the guitar player in Sawtooth, Jay, I've joined the band in the last few years, and he's like such an interesting like person to talk to because every time I talk to him, I feel like I learn so much more about him. And he's just like, oh, I have like a math degree. I'm like, what? And he's like the softest, quietest person to speak to. And then he writes this insane music, and I'm just like every time I talk to him, he's like a huge book reader. He's in a book club. I'm like, this is insane.
You gotta have stuff to pull from to make cool music.
Absolutely, I love that.
Gotta have hobbies. Do you have any other hobbies besides
I have
music?
a lot of hobbies, which is also why I don't probably chase the gear as much because I chase other gear in other fields. So like really into cars. I do a lot of wrenching on stuff and constantly modify cars till they break usually. And also firearms, which is another insane like gear hobby that like you spend way too much money on. So like I have a ton of hobbies. Like gaming is another hobby that I spend way too much time in, and also expensive. But yeah.
It seems like you split your time amongst a lot of different things.
Yeah, I think I have to. And like I do this thing, and my wife pointed this out, that like I get like hyper focused on things. So like for 3 months, I'll be like, I build like a full-on motion racing simulator in my house. So like it moves and everything.
Me too.
Yes. Okay, we can talk about that later.
Sure.
Yeah. So like VR and that stuff will be like a big part of my life for 3 months. And then I just like get exhausted. I'm like, I don't even want to look at it. So I'm going to move to this hobby. And then I like get into something else really extensively and really dig into for a while. And then I'm like, all right, I need something else now. And I move around and I just keep juggling a bunch of different things. So.
Do you feel like there's a common element to all those hobbies that you could kind of go, I get this from music, what I get from firearms or gaming? Or...
I think like tinkering. I think it's like...
Just opening it up and seeing how it works.
Yeah, I think that stuff always interests me. And like firearms are just obviously very mechanical, and like it's just like such a like building a racing sim. It's all like, how do I do this? I have no idea how to do this. And now you're adding in like transducers to things and all kinds of like wacky stuff, and implementing motion in VR and having them all talk together, like working on systems is really interesting to me. Yeah. I'm a super dork, obviously. Super dork.
No, that's cool. I think anybody who's passionate or into something, even if the subject matter might be considered dorky, it becomes infectious after a while because you're just so into it.
Yeah.
I mean, my nephew's into trains. I mean, to the point of like knowing with his eyes closed what train is coming through when, with what kind of, what, and I'm like, I'm thrown into it. I couldn't care less about
that's
trains.
Amazing.
Right. But the fact that he knows every little thing about it, I'm like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean,
then I push him down the stairs or something.
Every time I hear like a Subaru come down the road, I tell my wife, I'm like, that's a Subaru to like a mile away. She's
know?
Yeah. I mean, you could hear the Boxer engine, but
yeah, I know.
Psychos can hear that. Yes.
Thank God you said it.
With the cycling of hobbies like that, it seems like you're very motivated by novelty. Like a new thing pops up and that like grabs your attention. When you're working on longer form projects that you kind of can't cycle away from or can't go split your attention to something else, how do you deal with that? How do you stick out something that maybe loses your attention halfway through?
Interesting. I guess I'd have to think about that. I mean, trying to stay focused on stuff too. Obviously, that can be difficult for someone who probably has ADHD. I think not giving up on stuff too is important. What would be an example that you would think of something that you like might lose interest in, like a record or
like
a project?
if I start a record like halfway through, I'm like, I've listened to my own songs a million times by now, and now I hate them, and like it hasn't even come out yet, I already hate it.
Yes.
It's like, how do you push past that? Like if you've lost interest.
Well, I think for my benefit, the way that I usually work with my clients is it's sometimes, very rarely is the budget so that like they can block out like months at a time. So they usually block out like a week, 2 weeks, something like that. And then by the end of that, I'm probably pretty fried and I don't want to hear those songs ever again. But then that's just probably for tracking. So like when we get to like switching to doing something else or mixing, I've already I probably completely erased that stuff from my head. And then the next band that I work on, that's the earworm that whether the song is good or bad is stuck in my head. And so like, I guess I don't get super fatigued. I can refresh it pretty quickly. So that's definitely nice. Because if I was working on the same project for like 4 months, straight without any other bands involved. Like I'm always cycling between at least 10 to 15 different projects at the studio on like a by month basis.
And it keeps it fresh.
Yeah, that's what it is nice to have switch gears to a different artist sometimes. So that way you can just like reset your brain. There is negatives to that because like I'm not in the same flow. Like I have to like re-listen to the songs like, oh yeah, we did that thing here. I totally forgot we did that, or why did I make that choice or something like that. So it's definitely not all positives, but it is nice in that sense where my brain can like distance itself and then have a month to come back to it. So if that is something that maybe bums you out, try that. Maybe like do distance yourself from it if you're getting exhausted, and then reapproach it after a break.
That's a really good point. I think sometimes when you're trying to learn a song too, you could be hammering at it for hours, and it's like, and you're close.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm just going to go ride my bike or make something to eat. And then you come back and it's like, it's all there.
This is
like
something I've learned recently.
It's real.
Yes, it is definitely real. I don't understand how the brain obviously works. I'm not that smart, but it's definitely real for me. And I've talked to other people and they say the same thing. Like, I will get it under my fingers if I'm playing guitar or learning something to the point where it's like, I can kind of play it pretty good. That's where I should stop. I will approach it the next day or something like that. And then it's like, whoa, I've downloaded it and it's now just like getting better. And like cramming it for hours is not working.
It's like a delayed synapse or something.
Yeah.
It's just this part of your brain
in the background.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's got to be a term for it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like for me, I want to just learn it in one sitting. I want to be done with it. I want to get it out of the way, but it's just not how it works for me. And I guess other people too. So like just kind of like not caring more and just kind of like, so like getting a quick run at it works better, and then applying that again seems to just like lock it in for me. I wish I knew that like way longer ago.
See, I'm always afraid that if I walk away from something, I'm just never going to come back to it.
Really?
Yeah.
There is an element of that though, where you think you'll play something on the couch, you're like, oh, it's so good, I'll remember it. It's like, I don't remember any of it.
Yeah.
You know? And then you're like, damn, and it was so good.
Yep.
You know,
I have that with dreams a lot of the time. Like I'll wake up from a dream and I'm like, I just wrote the sickest thing in my dream, and I'm like, I'm gonna remember that. I'm gonna make make it, and then I forget it instantly.
Yeah.
Like I never have once remembered it.
That's why you got to instantly write down your ramblings like as soon as you're having them.
Yeah. That would be interesting to try.
Well, and we're lucky now because everything is right to your, like if you do think of something in the middle of your, you could just grab your phone and at least hum it in there.
Yeah.
Sometimes you think about how much great music was made 100 years ago, 50 years ago on such primitive gear.
Right.
And how did you catalog all that stuff? And was it talent, or was it because you were kind of forced to have to remember it and have your stuff together?
Yeah, that is interesting to think about.
Yeah. We're lucky with all the options we have now, but like you said, it almost, what was that? The term you used
Option
before.
paralysis?
Yes, option paralysis.
Yes, that is also a real thing too.
Yeah.
But going back to the gear, you have too many things. I tell that to like the intro students, is like there's definitely a desire for them to be like, let me grab all these plugins for EQ.
Which is a good thing, by the way.
No, it's not. So like they want to grab all the plugins and have all these cool things because everyone, like they want to have everything that everyone else thinks is cool, blah, blah. But it's like, you need to pick one. You need to learn it really well, be really effective with it, be really efficient with it, and then move on to the next gig, move on to the next instrument, move on. And it's just like, pick one. And then when you master that one and you're feeling bored with it, get another one or get two. But like, don't pull up the plugin box and then see like a whole 2 rows of plugins. And you're like, I don't know what any of these do.
Yeah, it's like going to Cheesecake Factory. That menu is like 65 pages. And it's like, I want one of everything.
That's right. That's why I just get one thing every time.
What do you get?
I either get the shroom burger or I'll go with, my wife's going to kill me because I ask her what it is every time. I rely on her for so much stuff. I'm just like, what do I order? She's like, it's this. I tell you every time. I'm like, thank you.
Thank you, honey.
So it's whatever that is. I'll text her right now.
Kevin's wife commented.
I think it's Louisiana chicken, maybe.
Oh, good choice.
Something like that.
That's so
I don't know.
good.
I'm saying it wrong. But
yeah, the shepherd's pie is really good there too.
That's what Jay got last time.
It's
we went
so
there after the
hot.
last rehearsal.
Burn your tongue right off.
We should do a full interview about.
I always
menu tasting.
I always link food and music.
Really?
Yeah, we talked about this, and it's like everyone's like, okay, we got it. But for some reason, there's so many. And again, we could talk about it later because no one will want to watch that. But it's stunning how many crossovers there really are.
Yeah. What we like to do in our project now with Sawtooth is we'll get together for a rehearsal. We'll grind it out for like, whatever, 6 hours. And then we mandatory have to go out to dinner afterwards together to somewhere like that, usually like a diner, New Jersey diner, something like that. And that kind of like sets everything back. Like kind of, I don't know. It just feels good to just sit around with everyone and eat.
But you've earned it. It's still that communal thing. You get into a room and you make music together, and will make you a better musician. I'm convinced that if you go out to dinner with people, it makes you a better eater.
There you go.
Yeah. I know that's deep. You weren't expecting that coming
I
here.
like that though.
Yeah. I've become a much better eater in life.
I unfortunately have the thing, this is so, you can cut this, but I have a thing where like, because of being a producer engineer, like we don't have like, I mean, at least I don't. You probably should like have a mandatory like half-hour break, like lunch break. I eat through work. So like, I'm literally not enjoying food at work when I'm doing that. I'm just like shoving it down as fast as possible. So I am not a good eater. I'm just
we can
getting
work
it done
that,
to get the nutrients and get on to work.
I'm hungry.
Which sucks.
But it's
We should
efficient.
eat after this.
Yeah.
Let's go out.
I'm ready.
Tell me about Mathcore mixing ritual.
Oh, yeah. That's something we did recently, actually, with Sawtooth and Christian on his site. That was fun. That was kind of just like do a quick production course with a certain project and show your kind of like your workflow with it. So I would definitely recommend checking it out if you're like interested in either doing that kind of music, like kind of like grindy mathcore type stuff. And obviously it's my approach. My approach is not the only approach. It's just how my brain works and how I like to do things. So it's I think it's pretty good. It worked out pretty well. So check that out.
Check it out.
Yeah.
You heard the man. Okay. I've heard that you have lots of stems of classical music.
Oh.
Any specific stems that you have that you're really excited to have? And why do you have them? What do you use them for?
I want to know where you found that out from.
I do my research.
I do have lots of stems of all kinds of music, not just that. I have just anything. So a lot of times I'll take those, and for fun, when we're having like a moment in the studio or we have a break, I'll like take someone's vocal track that does obviously not belong and throw it in, like the vocals from like Down with the Sickness, and throw it in their song and then surprise them, and then they freak out.
Gotta do it.
Yeah. So like I mean nowadays obviously with certain like AI apps you can like extract stems like decently. It does a pretty good job. I'm sure it's only gonna get better. But like I do have like some of the original multi-tracks for like Queen stuff. I have so much Queen. And that stuff is wild to solo.
It's amazing.
It is crazy what they have. And then like stuff that's just like obviously muted on the final edit, but it still lives on the track. It's pretty wild to hear that stuff. And here all like, back then, like the vocal pitch wasn't always perfect, and that was okay.
Right. Yeah.
See, but I think that we talk about perfection, and everyone is striving for perfection. I think it's the mistakes that make something perfect.
Yeah, no, and it's the vibe and like how it comes across, like the attitude. So if it's not perfect, but it's like it feels really good, that weighs more for me. Like that's better for me than just like something super clinical.
And I think Queen's a great example. I was listening to it was like Sheer Heart Attack or like Tie Your Mother Down, and that intro, and you're like, it's 1975 or something. How did they go in there knowing not only what they wanted to do, but how to execute it? Because it wasn't like now where we go, oh yeah, I got that on a button.
Yeah.
Like how did they do that?
Just ingenuity, like super talented people. Like I do think, I mean, obviously there's crazy talent here now today too. Like I'm not going to say there's not. There's insane talent.
Of course
today.
there is, yeah.
But there was just like kind of like legendary talent back then because the odds were so against them, I feel like, in so many ways. Now we have so many aids. We have so many, like, everyone can own a studio. Everyone can do, like, stare at yourself, I mean, like, your performance on screen and see what you did wrong, see what you did right, stuff like that. Like, they were just, they weren't trying to be engineers a lot of time back then. They were just like, we go to this place, they record it, I'm performing it, that's my job. So I feel like that's why I enjoy listening to it so much, like Marvin Gaye or something like that. You just know, like I have those stems and you can hear the squeak on the hi-hat is audibly crazy loud.
John Bonham. I mean, the squeaky bass drum on,
yeah.
And if you took that out, you might not perceive it right away, but you'd be like, something's missing.
Right. Yeah. There's some like Metallica stuff from the Black Album. There's like weird shaker in the background on like Sad But True.
Yeah.
And like,
which is the last song you'd think would have that.
I know, but it had such a groove to it. It's just a deep groove that like you wouldn't even know it's there, but it's there enough. It's so subtle. And that's what my favorite thing about the stems is like discovering the things I love, and like now I'm like,
and then you can never unhear it.
Yeah,
when you hear your song a million times, and then you pick up on this one little thing, you're like, oh, Oh my God, I never knew that was there.
It's really good. I would say for any like aspiring engineers or producers, it's really good to get your hands on that stuff and see why classic records are classic, like where the extra guitar layers matter.
The ear candy.
Yeah, that stuff is really important. And like I try to always push bands into being like, okay, we've, like, oh, we're going to finish up a little bit ahead of time. Like, let's not do that. Let's try to fill that time with something useful like ear candy, or book an extra day or two for ear candy.
Do you have any hacks for that? Any secret weapons, or do you just kind of, it's a case by case basis?
It's case by case, but like if you can get percussion, it makes a big difference. I really like adding percussion layers, even if they're like quiet. They really do emphasize groove on backbeats and verses and stuff like that. Like shaker, whatever, tambo, anything really does make a big difference. But the thing is, you can't necessarily just have the drummer do it, because that's not like hand percussion. That's different. Someone has to. Doing an egg shaker, it requires so much dexterity. It's crazy, because you have to get all of the intermediate parts.
I just making a margarita.
Yeah, maybe that'll
and then
work.
you have something to show for
try
it.
That.
Yeah. Well, I'm here to help.
Absolutely.
It's true. I think people underestimate the ability that percussionists like actually need.
Yeah.
They're like, it's just hitting something, right?
Yeah, back in the day, a lot of bands would have a percussionist. That's not as common anymore.
Look at Slipknot.
Yep.
I mean, you take that out of there.
Right.
You're missing that. There's that element of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I work with an artist called Will Wood, and his records have like layers upon layers upon layers. A lot of the layers don't even make it to the final cut. But yes, if you want to listen to wild stuff, those records are insane. That one's good.
How did you see that?
I can't read. I'm working on it.
There were large words there.
I have two silly things to say.
I love silly things.
I watched a tour of Backroom Studios and noticed two things that I thought were interesting. One, you have a tiny cardboard cutout of Gordon Ramsay. Why?
Honestly, I don't know. So I'm not the only person who uses the control room, and like there's a signed autograph photo of Lars up there from Metallica, and it says, "Thanks for the mixes circa 2001 or something." I didn't put that there. It's not real, but I get asked about it all the time. I was going to say,
that's pretty great.
No. I mean, there's like some loose connection between Dillinger and Metallica stuff. So, especially with Ben playing in Suicidal now, and like they're touring with Metallica. So there's like loose connection there. So some people who know that would go like, maybe that's real. But like, no, we were just out on the road. I was on tour, and someone thought it would be fun to make that and put that in the studio, and now it lives there.
Oh,
and
that's Lars Bullock. You're like, it's not Sorry. But Gordon Ramsay,
that just showed up one day. I went to the studio, it was there, and now it lives there. And everything in the studio like that is like that. It showed up. I didn't put it there.
Do you have a poltergeist?
No, it's just,
I think Kelly's going to sneak in there and put something there.
There's some totally weird little knickknacks all around that room. Yeah.
But it adds to the vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your drumhead wall, too, is the other thing I was interested in.
Yes, that is something I started probably later than I wanted to. Like, I've been doing this for so long. If I had started at the beginning, it would go the entire length of the 7,000 square foot spot. But it's does cover at least 1 to 2 walls at this point. So I do love that, and it's just like a fun thing. If I can remember to ask the drummer when they're tracking, like just for the band, do some kind of inside joke that pertains to this session, hopefully, and it gives me like when I'm old, like now, I can go back there. And I'm like, I remember that session. That was great. Oh, I remember that joke. Like that was a fun time. So that's why I do that.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Any favorite drum heads?
Like actual to use?
Yeah, or the one. Any favorite drum heads from the wall?
There's a lot of really funny ones. Probably certain things I shouldn't repeat. But if you go there, you can read them. Yeah.
Okay.
There's some good ones. But that's it, man. It's just like the only way to get good at this is just to do it, and screw up and figure out where you screwed up and try new things. It's just experience. Fortunately, there is no real fast tracking this stuff. It's just trial and error. Right. Okay. We want to do audience questions where we have like the Bob Barker mic. We just,
Steve in Oakland. Thanks for calling in.
Love that.
So for years I worked in music retail in Paramus, New Jersey. And then so obviously you don't get paid very well to do that. So if you were smart, on your lunch break, you would go to like Glen Rock or somewhere and you would give a guitar lesson.
Yeah.
And after a while, you would give a lesson, you'd realize I'm teaching this to somebody. And then you realize how much you're learning from the student, as rudimentary as they might be. As a teacher, you coming in there armed with all this knowledge, did you ever kind of have a situation where you were learning from the people in that audience, like something you thought you'd never think of?
I mean, I definitely learn like little things all the time, like constantly. And I make a point to say that I'm learning. Like, this is new to me. Like, I didn't know you could do this. Obviously, DAWs, like Pro Tools, have infinite like shortcuts and things that, like, unless you're like designing them, probably you only a few people know them. So like, I think on Monday someone pointed out, I was like, how I try to quiz the kids all the time, like, how do I do this?
Right.
And then someone tells me a shortcut, and I'm like, let me try that. And it works. I'm like, that's cool. I can now incorporate that. And that does happen pretty often. And I do like being humbled like that. I think that's great. But also too, I definitely learn a lot of what I don't actually know. So when I try to explain it to someone and I'm like, this is dither. And then they're like, what, can you go over that again? I'm like, no, not right now. I'm like, it's not super important. Don't worry about it.
I always think, are you familiar with the Naked Gun movies?
Yes.
Well, someone points out to Frank Drab and he's like, I know that now. That's how I feel about all sorts of things. Like, I knew that the whole time, except now that you just pointed it out to me, right. I had no clue.
And that's part of like revising my curriculum there. Is like, I'll teach stuff that like out of the book. I'm like, yeah, I know what that is. I learned that. And then I try to explain it and I'm like, I don't know what the I'm talking about.
I'm good. I feel better about myself. Yeah. This is good.
I feel like there's also a lot of opportunities for students to use other tools that you might not have had access to, like AI, for instance. How do you feel about the prevalence of AI? How do you feel like it is helping and or hurting the recording industry?
I think like any tool, probably it's a double-edged sword. You can use it in a great way. There's a lot of benefits for it. And there's also, if you're using it and it's a detriment in terms of like you're not actually learning the lesson there or doing the job, it's not going to help you in later. If I could equate that to something outside of the educational realm, like for me early on, something like that would be like using amp sims, like especially now. Back when I was using them, when they were in their infancy, most of them were trash. But now they're really good. Like a lot of them sound incredible. The IRs, certain companies have made incredible IRs. Still, some companies make shitty IRs for some reason. But
you want to name any of those?
Well, we could talk about that afterwards. Yeah, you can easily get a great sound with any of those plugins now, or modelers or whatever. But when you get into the situation where you have to mic an amp with multiple microphones or whatever, multiple amps, like you're not going to be prepared for that. So like you're just putting off the inevitable. And like, yeah, you can get great sounds with it, but pushing yourself into the uncomfortable spots and like trying to learn that stuff, you're just not helping yourself. So maybe in a way, like AI is kind of like that. Like, yeah, you can use it to get the job done, but you're pushing away the inevitable of like exercising that muscle of like learning what actually needs to be done.
Right. It's like using a calculator in math class.
Yeah, I do. I'm pro calculator. Pro calculator for sure.
I'm still using an abacus.
Good for you.
Even better.
I just had it oiled. Better. But it's funny how much money we sink into these devices that are meant to replicate something that was kind of imperfect to begin with. So like when you get plugins and you get AI, you get all this stuff, and then someone will come up with this piece of gear to make it sound wrong again, like a summing box or something. You're going to add this analog vibe to something that was meticulous, and it's like we're addicted to that. We still like tubes and guitar amps. We still like analog things or ribbon mics and stuff like that. And so you'll get all this gear that's aimed to replicate the stuff we were trying to make obsolete in the first place.
I have a terrible conspiracy.
Yo, go.
That part of that whole thing is maybe to do with engineers. Like the artists are great. They're doing their thing. They're playing their songs. They're happy with the takes, whatever. And the engineers need to justify their job and like assert some kind of level of dominance, or like my job is important. So they feel the need to get in there and adjust and fix and like, see, guys, I did good. Like, this is better now. And if they would have just left the shit alone, no one would have cared.
It's the human element that makes everything so good and awful at the same time.
That's true.
I mean, I'm just kind of half kidding, but maybe.
I think there's something to that. Yeah, Kelly perked up. She agrees, and we're really smart. So.
Yeah, so I feel like we didn't get your inspiration inside of sound design. Like we didn't get your musical inspirations either. So maybe I'll just ask you what your inspirations are in general, and then I'll do that.
And then segue into sound design.
Sure.
I mean, I think it's important not to just be inspired. This probably sounds way too deep, from just music in general, but like anything. Like if I go hiking and I see insane like landscape or mountaintops, that's more inspiring sometimes than music to me. That's just like, whoa, like what a perspective shift. Like, when you see stuff like that, you're like, man, all those problems I had that I thought were real problems, like I don't really care about those anymore, because like I see this thing that's been here forever and it's going to continue to be here hopefully for forever, for a long time, and this stuff doesn't really matter. It's very trivial. So like I try to get inspiration from other things too. There's definitely bands that I watch and I'm like totally, like I have certain moments in my life that I'm like, that was stunning, like that I will never forget that. Like when we were on tour with Dillinger, we did a festival. I don't remember what it was, but it was somewhere and Aerosmith was headlining, and we somehow got to watch side stage. I don't know who knew who or something, but they were so incredible and had such an impact on me just watching like literal like legends, like pros do it. Like Dillinger is insane live, like almost untouchable from a fan standpoint, in that kind of realm. But like when you watch Aerosmith do it, it makes me exhausted. Like they are crushing, and they just do things that like make, like there were so many amps, there were so many cabs. The guitar was so loud, and Steven Tyler would take his mic and just shove it straight into the cab. And the front of house probably lost his mind. He's probably used to it. He's probably like, "Oh, it's happening right now."
Yeah, here he goes.
Yeah, and then like he's singing, like sounds incredible, and he's walking down these insanely long catwalks, hitting all these notes. Like that's a lot of cardio.
And
that's
it's probably high as hell too,
man.
if you think of it.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And they sounded incredible. So like just like stuff like that. Like even if you took away all the sound reinforcement, in a room that band rips. So like there's definitely bands like that I've seen. That size, local bands that I've seen, I'm just like, yo, this band has it. There's a local like New York band called Moontooth that like the guitar player is. When I watched him play, I was like, this dude's gonna be something. Like he's incredible. So yeah, definitely stuff like that. But I know you were talking about, you're going to say sound design?
Non-musical inspirations as well.
Yes. Movies is a big thing in my life. I'm a huge movie buff. So like, there's great things about that, but like my psycho brain hears the same repeated sounds in all different movies. Like they use so many of the same sound effects from whatever library it is, their Foley library. That bothers me. That really sucks me out of the moment when they recycle the same exact sounds. But I do like love Dune 2 is probably my favorite movie of all time. Like Vinny, his movies are almost always my favorites when he does something. So like Blade Runner, Sicario, like all that stuff. With the sound design, the tension that they create is insane. Like Sicario, if you watch it, there's tension from the start of that movie to the end of the movie. It's like it never ends. And I just love that can be done with obviously the acting, but like the subtle stuff in the background, like whatever the pads they're using, it's insane.
Oh, for sure. Like the first Halloween's like that. There's so little blood in that movie, and it's the menace of it. It kind of weighs on you.
Yes.
I have one last question. Do we have time for one last question?
4 minutes.
4 minutes. Okay.
I'm going to do it.
Do you ever, let's say I have an example for this. Like you love a band and there's an album of theirs that you love, that you want to take the quality of the music, but you prefer the production of a different album they did. Like for me, it's like Bad Motorfinger. Mm-hmm. Love that album, but I think some of the production's kind of thuddy. But I love Super Unknown's production, but I don't love that album as much as I love. So if you took Bad Motorfinger with the production of Super Unknown, it would be like this colossus. Like, do you ever think of that where you listen to a band and you're like, oh, I love that record, but I love the production on a later album because the production got better, but maybe the songs weren't as good? Do you ever think to yourself, what if we took that and did that?
I think my favorite band, if I had to pick one, would be King Crimson. So they definitely, their catalog has sounds from the 60s all the way till now, essentially. So like they have their production style for like certain records it's not great. It is what it is, So I wish some of those records could be like almost redone in a way, but not.
So like you could take Red, but then have the sound of Three of the Perfect Pair.
Yes, or even later, like something like Thrash.
That's like scratching an itch, man.
Yeah,
it feels so much better.
Because I just saw them twice live recently.
Yeah,
and you hear Red like on stage, and you're like, "Yo, this is so good. I wish I could hear this." And you listen to the song, and it's like, "This is awesome," but like, I wish I could hear it like today. You
So
know?
and that points to the example of a really good song, well produced, is like,
yeah,
it's everything. You know, sometimes great production can save a mediocre song, or you know, a great song could be poorly produced, but it's still great. To have those things.
Keep bearing in mind, great production is extremely subjective. You know.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, like what I think great production is could be completely opposite to what you think it is, and no one's wrong. You know, it's just what you enjoy, what
You'd
you
be
identify
wrong.
with.
I would be wrong.
Well, actually,
No cheating. Last song played on your phone.
oh god,
On my phone?
Ooh.
Or their phone?
Everyone's. Why not?
Everyone's?
Why
So you're gonna
not?
expose
I
me
could
right
take a
now?
look.
I mean, it's gonna be.
Say it into the mics, or do we want-
No, I have no shame.
Mine's gonna be probably Taylor Swift or something like that because my wife uses the Spotify. So my answer's not gonna be great. I mean, she's
Taylor,
great.
what's wrong?
She's great.
She's great.
But it's
She's a
not
great
gonna be
lady.
a very like a me answer.
Oh, what was yours?
Settle the-
What was yours?
Mine was it's a song called "Out There" by Jimmy Vaughn.
Oh,
He's Stevie Ray Vaughan's older brother, and that record for me again, it's blues, but it's the production. You hear the room,
yeah.
you hear like the dust.
And
on
do you
the floor.
like the room or not like the room?
I love it. I
Okay.
think anything in that room would sound good.
Yeah.
It just sounds like people playing.
Yeah.
Very little of anything. It's like you know, what's the best makeup in the world? That looks like none. You know,
Right.
That's what it sounds like. Someone put a mic in a room, everyone had their game on, and it just worked.
Right. I try
And
to
there was
emphasize
squeaky
that
bass
to people
drum.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all
Kelly,
about the squeak. It's all about the squeak. Mine
Your
was "You Can Be Mean" by Indigo D'Souza.
that was my third guess.
You didn't have guess one or two.
I sure didn't.
I mean, if you want chaos and you want like total insanity, I would definitely go to a Dillinger show. If you go to a Dillinger, if you can take a time machine back to like the earlier days of Dillinger when I was a fan, and you want to feel like you might not make it out of that room, go to one of those shows. A small room.
Yeah, no, you were afraid that you might get hurt. Like there will be bloodshed. I mean,
Yeah.
You saw guys
or
were getting
there's fire,
hurt.
or
Yeah.
there's like, or the drummer or the singer's throwing the cymbal stand at you. Like, move out of the way. There's probably some stuff we probably should say not on camera, but like, you know, a lot of audience members have been hurt, and there's been plenty of blood, myself included.
Zero.
We made it. We'd like to thank Kevin for coming out today. Be sure to check out Backroom Studios on all social platforms. For more content like this, be sure to like and subscribe, and check us out at AmericanMusical.com.